All right, I am ready. Thank you so much for joining me today because, as you all know, we're doing My Child is a Genius, the back to school launch. And I just truly believe that all children are geniuses because we're fearfully and wonderfully made. We also are like snowflakes, everybody's different. If everybody was the same, that'll be super duper uber boring. So today, I have a wonderful, crazy, flamboyant, in your face, love you to pieces, teacher, Kitty. Hi, Kitty.
Hi.
Now I know you, but can you just give me a little bit of background about yourself?
I am a mom. I have a lot of kids. I lost track. No. I have a biological kid, three step kids, and four foster kids that have either grown up or live back with their parents. But they never really grow up,
They never grow up.
and they never really go away. And I also teach second grade in West Philadelphia,
Awesome.
which is a really fun job, really fun job. And I grew up. I grew up in Delaware,
Okay.
And mostly around my father's family. And I grew up with a strong sense of identity as being mixed Native and white.
Mhm.
And my dad was a tribal historian who worked really hard to make sure that our our community's tribal like historical legacy and
Yeah.
archaeological legacy was kept like in the forefront. And he spent about 30 years and a lot of his own resources making sure that that came to fruition. So he taught me very early on that it was very important to understand exactly what had happened and when it had happened and why.
Wow. Wow. That is, first of all, that's dynamic to have
It's
a
awesome.
father who's a historian and you don't
Yeah.
have to like look through books created by other people who may or may not be omitting history, which we know happens like crazy.
Uh-huh.
Especially when I read this new history book and it said it changed the word slaves to indentured servants or something.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, well, that's crazy. So I think that's so dope that you know your history as being native, and you have a great handle on pretty much society and social injustices and just different ways of life. Now, being a teacher, second grade teacher in West Philadelphia, what or how important do you think understanding just the social and economic environment is for you to be an effective teacher?
It's super important. I mean, I don't think, well, no kid lives in a vacuum, right? That's what they keep
Right.
telling us. And I think that it's really important to remember that like our kids are coming to school every day with a whole history behind them, so every kid walks into the classroom not just with their family history, but also with their class history and their racial history and their ethnic history. And that all informs us and makes us who we are. We're just a accumulation of the stories of our ancestors. We're not like, we didn't magically spring out of the ground with nothing behind us. So knowing that I have kids coming to school in my classroom who are facing the injustices of living in a rapidly gentrifying neighborhood, right? Like, whereas 2-3 years ago maybe they had 3-4 aunts and uncles and their grandparents right down the street. Now the historically Black parts of our community are being turfed out, for lack of a better word. And the rental prices have gotten so ridiculously high that if you don't own your house, like, you probably can't stick around here.
Yeah.
So knowing just in the immediate term that they're coming in with, a lot of kids are dealing with that in their family lives, like, that's super disruptive. But then also, like, on a bigger, more historic scale, right? Like knowing that this is a neighborhood that was redlined
Yeah.
pretty heavily.
Right.
So knowing the history of my school that I work at, that it's on the other side of 48th Street. And historically, 48th Street was that line of like, oh, on one side of 48th Street, it's a good neighborhood. On the other side of 48th Street, bad neighborhood. And if you walk up further past 48th, then you start getting into that bad neighborhood.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
understanding that in a like historical context, but then also like the story of the Great Migration and the story of the Housing Act of the 1930s and how that eliminated Black and brown people from owning property in certain neighborhoods. Just knowing that informs how I present stuff to the kids. And you can talk about institutionalized racism with kids at their level, because guess what? They already know that it exists.
They do.
They know from the beginning that it exists. And, you know, for Black and brown kids, it's important to give them voice, because you can feel crazy if you're walking out in the world. Like, it can feel maddening if you look around you and you see it, but nobody's giving it a word, or nobody's giving it a name or a context, or empowering you to do something about it. It can be maddening. And for white kids, it's even more important. Like, white kids need to understand and recognize that they're benefiting from these systems of institutionalized racism, and they need to start questioning it, like, I would say, from the beginning. And with my kids, like, we talk about these things and we use very explicit language. You know, I caught my stepson spitting at somebody the other day, and I was like, no, no, no. And it's rude, first of all. Like, that's disgusting. But but also, there is a history that's not that old where a white kid could spit at a Black kid and there would be no consequences. So, you know, as a white kid, like, nobody should spit at anyone, but like, you especially have to understand that if you spit in the direction of somebody, that it might get taken a certain way.
And I think those social cues and understanding historical context is very, very, very important. Not just for, you know, white kids, but for Black kids. Like you said, you grew up knowing your history. Our kids, unfortunately, do not know their history like, you know, they should, or we don't know our history like we should, because it seems to get hidden and snuffed.
Oh yeah.
Covered up with a whole bunch of other things, and it's almost like a whole illusion to even your existence, right? Just being Black and brown, like, you have this weird kind of treasure map, that's like this treasure hunt that you have to go on. We are, and it's like, freaking ridiculous, you know? But being a teacher and knowing that you're going to have to teach subjects that I guess include Christopher Columbus. Like, how do you, like, now we know we have the internet, we have all of these cool videos, we have, you know, history at our fingertips. How do you, I guess, bring the truth out of it without, like, freaking kids completely out? Like, how do you like, I mean, because I freaked my son out. I did. Last year, Ryan came home with this hat with Christopher Columbus Day, and I was like, he said, yeah, Christopher Columbus is a good man. I said, oh, no. Christopher Columbus was a freaking monster. And we sat down at the computer, and I showed him Adam Ruins Everything, and we went through that little historical trip, the animated version. But I'm like, do you see how many people were slaughtered? He didn't find anything. He just came. That's like going in somebody else's house and freaking killing everybody, and then just forwarding.
Exactly. That's exactly what it's like. Yeah, no, Ziggy came home with that same hat, and I just, like, I started shaking. I had to give it over to my husband. I had to be like, I really need you to do this right now, because I will scream. Yeah. But I mean, I was able to reach out to this teacher and give her some resources and say, hey, maybe you don't know this. And she, you know, she legitimately didn't.
Right. And that's
because, like, what's a suburban white girl from South Jersey gonna, like, it's not gonna come across her desk.
It's not. You know? It's I mean, come on. In history class, we celebrate what? Christopher Columbus, Black History Month, or we
Manifest Destiny. Don't forget Manifest Destiny.
Like, dude, I don't even, like, growing up, I only think we did 3.
Yep. No,
Maybe.
Manifest Destiny is one of my least favorites. I mean, I remember my fifth grade teacher, you know, we were doing the American Revolution, and my fifth grade teacher was like, all of the Delaware Indians are dead. And there were like 3 tribally enrolled kids in his class. And I came home and I told my dad that. He came up into school the next day, pounded on my teacher's desk. Like, just, he was a big man with like crazy thick black hair that like went straight up in the air. He just like pounded on his desk, and like I remember just like rage.
Right.
And he got banned from my school, but
Good reason. That was a good reason.
It was worth it.
Right, totally worth it. But I mean,
yeah,
you are, I would say, very rare, because you're a teacher who is culturally sensitive. Like, you're not just opening a book and taking it at its word. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
I
okay,
hope
great.
so.
Oh, I guess slaves were indentured servants because they came over here by choice. You know, like, okay, like that kind of stupid stuff, and that gets regurgitated.
Yeah.
And then it comes home to me as a Black parent for a freaking project. What?
yeah. No, that's not happening in my classroom, and even in the
Right.
slightest.
Sorry, so sorry.
And I mean,
Okay.
is that my boy?
That is Royce. He went back
Oh.
to
Okay.
But like, how are you going to handle these things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I'm not going to be afraid of the R word, right? I want kids to say, like, hey, let's identify it for what it is. This is called institutionalized racism.
Right.
And you're not crazy. I mean, they think, so child psychologists have looked into like when the kids' understanding of race happens.
Yeah.
And it's around 4 or 5. So if I'm teaching second grade, they're a couple years into their like analysis and understanding of race. And our school is legitimately diverse. Like it's a diverse school with a diverse student body, not just, you know, I remember when I was student teaching, I student taught at a predominantly Black school. And one of my classmates was like, oh, you're at this school. That's a really diverse school. And I said to her, 98% Black is not diverse. That's 98% Black. And she just looked at me. I was like, diverse means that you actually have like a bunch of people with a bunch of different perspectives.
Like mixed.
And we need to talk about those perspectives. We need to give, you know, space to most of them. And, you know, we need to talk, because like, you know, and it's about having a conversation. It's about being really honest. And you know, my son, he's white. I mean, for all intents and purposes, like a DNA test might say something else, but he's a white kid.
Yeah.
And he's a white boy, and he's a white boy of educated parents in America. So, you know, he's coming into the world with a whole lot of privilege.
Right.
And, you know, and I explain it to him, you know, say things like, well, hey, so you know how your stepmom's family has a beach house, and that's really lucky for you, but not everybody gets access to that beach house.
Right.
And, you know, when you assume that everybody has what you have, you've got to understand that that's not the case. And it might make somebody feel like they're not good enough because they don't have this cool thing that you have.
Right.
And like, let's talk about like, how can you be excited about the cool thing that you have without making somebody else feel bad that they don't have that too.
That's pretty good. That's like really, really, really good. You know, because I remember watching this episode of Blackish, and they were talking about the talk that generally Black parents have to have with their sons. Mm-hmm. And, you know, throughout the show, they were discussing different talks that, you know, everybody has to have with their child. Like you said, this is a talk that you have to have with your son about understanding that not everybody has the same access to different luxuries, right? And other women have to, you know, tell their daughters, maybe you need to cover up, and this isn't, you know, valued a certain way, this is viewed a certain way. So everybody has their quote unquote talk. I just think it's very important to have it, you know, as early as you can. And like you said, kids know about race early as 4 or 5. They understand differences and, you know, skin. So for somebody to say, I don't see color,
it's malarkey.
It's malarkey, and it's very offensive. Like, you're just
Yeah.
going to pretty much erase my existence and call it null just because you want this pseudo equality kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right, because it can't be equality if everybody's starting off in all these different places, right? Whether you're talking about class or race. I mean,
Right.
And in America, understand that class and race tend to be very close together.
Right.
But
right.
even within class, if you're born poor white, like, and I've seen this with my own two eyes, like, you can change the way you talk, you can change the way you dress, you can change the way you cut your hair, and now you got a whole different world than what you grew up in.
Exactly.
And for white people, it's that easy.
It is that easy because I was looking, we were driving somewhere, and it was this white guy, kind of grungy, with a homeless, sign up like, I'm homeless, anything helps. I'm like, buddy, if you just washed your face, combed your hair, and walked right into that Rite Aid across the street, you'd get a job.
Exactly.
It's like,
exactly. But then my foster son, who moved out to Alaska because he thought that it would be safer than Philly, because he got stopped. There was a summer he was working nights and like coming home late at night, and I kept my phone on all night on loud because he got stopped by the cops so many times.
Wow.
Just for being a very large, dark-skinned black boy out on the streets at night. And it's like, he's coming home from work.
Right.
But like, he decided to go, because I have family in Alaska, so he decided to go to Alaska, and he kind of loves it because it's nothing like Philly.
Right.
And he's really enjoying it up there, which is great. And he's really found his home. But even still, like, he's often the only black guy at work, and he's like, he's constantly like second guessing, why won't this girl date me? Why won't,
right.
this manager give me the benefit of the doubt? And it's like, even though it's not as dangerous for him there with the cop situation as it was for him here, it's still like he's constantly sort of up against this, and he's the most reliable, sweet, like, hardworking kid in the world.
We don't get
can't even get the benefit of the doubt.
We get the benefit of the doubt, and this is just ridiculous. Racism itself is mental illness.
It is. It's a mental illness.
Because you're like, you don't like me because of something I cannot change. I cannot take this skin. I can't.
No, you can't.
I can bleach it. You're still not going to be white.
Yeah, but still, please don't do that.
It's not. It's like, and I've seen black people bleach their skin and they look like a naked mole rat. Like, it's ridiculous.
They do. Yeah.
It's almost like the people who condemn you for being who you are want to be like you without giving you credit for it.
That's the thing that always kind of tripped me out, is that, like, I had, on the one hand, I had my granddad trying to, like, put, SPF 100 and, like, long sleeve shirts on me every summer because he didn't like how brown I'd get in the sun.
Right.
And then on the other hand, I have, like, girls at school, like, showing off their tan lines, and they're like, can y'all, like, come to an agreement?
Right.
Can you just agree? I'm like, am I supposed to get tan or am I not supposed to get tan? I don't know what you want from me here.
Mental ill. I just stopped trying to figure out the
very weird. It's very weird.
But Kitty, I just thank you for your contribution to society. Like, honestly, I thank you for being the reliable person that gets it. The white person who can talk to other white people and let them know, like, you're messing up. Like, this is not it. You know what I mean? Being a voice for those who don't get a benefit of the doubt. Being a face for people who are never, seen or never heard because they're not given a chance. So I think you being a second grade teacher and shaping young minds this early is going to be phenomenal. Like,
I'm excited.
You're just great. And I just want to know, for this year, what would be your message to other teachers?
Is that my boy?
Not a good, yes, that is him.
Hi, baby.
He cried, and now he's like, ha ha. Everybody, don't fall. Don't fall. You're about to fall. Oh, God. Don't fall. Not on the camera. Not on the camera, please. You hear a loud doom, like.
So my message to other teachers:
yeah,
don't be afraid to talk about it.
Right.
Don't be afraid. I mean, that's something that's built into white culture, and it's only white culture.
Wow.
You know, other cultures, other like ethnic groups and racial groups in America talk about it because you have to.
Right.
Because for Black and brown people in America, like, you're up against it every day.
Every day.
And so, you know, white teachers in Philadelphia, unfortunately, has majority white teachers in a, you know, like almost 50% Black school district.
Of course.
Which is not cool. Although I will say I had to go to orientation last week, and there were much more Black teachers in that orientation than I had anticipated. It still wasn't quite the levels that it needed to be, but I feel like maybe the school district hiring office is like, they got that memo.
I think, and that's super important for Black teachers, and especially Black male teachers.
Oh my God, yes. Yes. I have some theories about why we have so few Black and brown teachers. Hi, my baby. Hi.
Say hi, lady.
Hi.
Oh.
Hi, baby.
Very well.
But yeah, I mean, I think, so this is like a little bit of a tangent, but I think that one of the reasons why we have such a disparity in education these days, because when I was a kid, I wouldn't say it was like half my teachers were Black and brown, but I had a healthy number of Black and brown teachers in my school. And this was even in, you know, central Delaware.
Wow.
I feel like my teaching, if I go back through in my mind, all my teachers in elementary school, it was mixed. It was a mixed group. But I think with No Child Left Behind, they started putting these high stakes, hi baby, these high stakes, you know, learning requirements on. So now it's like, to even get in the door with education, you should be dually certified with a master's degree. And I put myself into like massive amounts of unsustainable debt because I was sold this idea that, you know, teaching's in my family past, like teaching is what we do. So I kind of always wanted to be a teacher, but I had to go into massive amounts of debt that I will literally never pay off, because I had to have this master's degree and I had to have this certification. And then, you know, in Pennsylvania, we have to keep going back and taking classes. It's like, you got to pay for those classes.
Right.
These are mandated to keep your certification, but one of these programs can cost $10,000. And so, you know, it's not like they really pay us all that great. Right. And then on top of it, you're expected to keep putting out money to, you know, bump up to the next level, because you have to keep progressing, because No Child Left Behind said you have to have these highly qualified teachers. So now it's like, you know, if somebody wants to go into education and they either don't want to or are not in the position to be able to take out student loans,
right,
you're kind of, you know, you're not doing so great. And I really wish I'd done some more research, because I got sold this idea that I'd be able to, like, you know, if I shelled out the extra money and I got the master's degree and I got the extra certification, I'd be making so much more a year. And that just hasn't really played out the way.
Yeah. Right.
You know, here we are 10 years later, and my student loans have almost doubled just because of accrued interest.
Exactly.
Because there's only been 2 years in the last 10 years that I've made the threshold on the income-based repayment plan to even meet the monthly minimum.
Yeah, and that's sickening in itself.
So I'm accruing all this extra interest on loans that I'll never pay off, and it's keeping me from being able to buy a house, keeping me from being able to save for my own kids to go to college. Like, you know, we've already told our kids, like, you're on your own, babies. Like,
right.
We love you, but that's not in the cards for us. So, you know, I'm not going to be able to pay for my kids if they want to go on and continue our family tradition of education. It's like, sorry.
And be like, hey,
get a good grades in high school, find a scholarship.
Go play. But unfortunately, that is a harsh reality for a lot of people.
Right. And if we go with the whole context story of like that class and race in our country fall very much along the same lines, right? Like families that have assets. I know my dad's family did not have the same kind of assets that my mom's family had.
Right.
because just being able to hang on to a house
Right.
was going to be hard, right? But my granddad was able to take full advantage of the GI Bill after World War II. He came from a stable middle class family. Like, I mean, that rolls down the generations.
Yeah.
And so, you know, even though I would probably, if I asked them, they wouldn't say that they were well off or whatever compared to my dad's family. They absolutely were.
Yeah.
And my dad's family was well off and stable compared to other branches of my own family, you know, that have had a much harder time gaining that stability and that, you know, class like solidity, you know. And it's hard because it's not like the middle class is sitting there with open arms saying, "Hey, come join us, everybody," right? Like that's just not a reality.
Just not.
So, you know, knowing that people have struggled and knowing that like the children of immigrants and like the children of Black families that have been redlined out of existence are now being gentrified out of their neighborhoods and out of their community structures. Like, I mean, these are all things that are real big issues, and we're not talking about it. And it's disingenuous to say, "Oh, every kid's going to go to college." Like, that's not reality.
Not reality. It's not true.
And then, you know, you get kids that like they're told their entire lives by their, you know, middle class white teachers, "Oh, you should go to college. You can do whatever you want. You can do all the right things." And then they get to high school and they're like, "I'm going to go to college." And then it's like, okay, but how are you going to pay for it?
Right.
Where's the money going to come from?
And that's why I think it's our job to help them understand what their genius factors are in order to generate momentum to get them on the right direction. Like, we spend too much time in things that are just not in our sphere. Like, it's just not. So, thank you, Kitty.
Thank you, Keisha.
And I hear people coming.
Hey! Hi.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
So
are you ready?
They're hungry.
Ready for third grade?
You ready?
No.
Why not? Okay. Goodbye. I'll
Thank
That is clear hunger talking. So Kitty, thank you so much. I'm putting this up on our Facebook page, My Child is a Genius, and it'll also be available on iTunes. So
And your child is a genius.
Yeah, you're a star.
You are.
Thanks.
Bye.
I'm gonna go be a good mom now. Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you. Give those boys a kiss for me.
I will.
Ah!
Bye.